There are things people carry for years because they cannot find the door. Not because the thing does not want to be said, because the architecture of how to say it, the specific form and the specific moment and the specific words that would do justice to something that has been living at full size inside someone for a long time has never quite assembled itself correctly. Every approach has felt insufficient. Every attempt has stalled at the last step because the step requires a vulnerability that the available language keeps failing to adequately prepare them for. This person has been standing at that door for longer than, and I have been given something they have not yet been able to give themselves the way through. I am going to tell you what they cannot, not because I know them better than they know themselves, not because what I am about to say has never been close to the surface of what passes between you, but because what I can offer is the version of this without the fear attached to it, without the specific personal stakes of someone who has to live with the consequences of having said it, without the risk that has been keeping the door closed. I am going to say it in a room where the only consequence is you hearing it, and then you can decide what to do with the hearing. Let me start with who this person is to you, not their name or their role, the quality of how they exist in your awareness. They are not peripheral. That is the first and most important thing. This is not someone who hovers at the edges of your daily life in the way that people you are loosely connected to hover. They occupy a more central position than that, in the specific, slightly disproportionate way that certain people occupy more interior real estate than their official position in your life would seem to warrant. You think about them more than you have explicitly acknowledged to yourself or to anyone else, in the way that certain people become woven into the ordinary texture of your thinking without a single deliberate decision to include them, where you find yourself wondering about their day or imagining their response to something or catching a thread of thought that leads to them in the middle of something entirely unrelated. They are in there, have been for a while, and they carry a version of the same thing in the other direction. The same quiet, non-deliberate, entirely involuntary kind of presence that a person occupies in you when they matter in a way that has not yet been spoken. Here is what they have been trying to find a way to say. You have changed something in them, not in the past tense, not in the sense of having had an effect that occurred at some prior point and is now a completed historical fact, in the present tense, in the ongoing, still active, still producing consequences sense of something that is continuously changing them in the direction of something they did not know they were capable of being before you entered their life, at whatever level and in whatever form. You have entered it. They are different because of you, not because you tried to change them, not because you made any specific effort toward their transformation, or because you positioned yourself as someone whose influence was going to produce particular results. Simply because being in proximity to who you are, to how you think and how you exist and what you care about and how you treat the things you care about, has produced in them an awareness of a version of themselves that they want to inhabit more fully. You showed them something by being yourself, and that something has been working on them since. And I want to be specific about what they have been changed in the direction of, because vague talk of transformation does not give you the actual content, and you deserve the actual content. They have become more honest, not universally, not with everyone, specifically in the interior of their own self relationship, in the private space of what they allow themselves to acknowledge about what they actually feel and what they actually want and what they are actually unwilling to continue accepting as sufficient before you. There was a way they had organized themselves around a set of convenient fictions, things they told themselves about what they needed, about what was available to them, about what kind of connection was possible for them and what kind they should not want too openly, because wanting it too openly creates exposure after you. The fictions are harder to maintain because you have been the inadvertent demonstration of something they had been telling themselves was not real, not available, not something people actually were, rather than something people performed in the direction of. You are real. And the reality of you has made their comfortable fictions untenable. And the reality of you has made their comfortable fictions untenable. I want to stay with this particular effect for a moment because I think it is one of the more unusual things I feel in this reading, and it deserves its own examination. Most people, when they want someone, want them for what that person gives them, for the feeling of being around them, for the comfort or the excitement or the specific quality of how the other person's attention lands. That is a real and legitimate form of wanting. But what I am reading in this person is something slightly different and in some ways considerably more significant. They want themselves, the version of themselves they are when they are around you or thinking about you or holding themselves to the standard that encountering you has introduced. You have become a reference point for their own becoming. And that is a very different kind of connection from the kind where someone simply wants your company. It is the kind where your existence in their awareness is producing something in them that they value and do not want to lose access to, where the wanting of you is inseparable from the wanting of the version of themselves that you make possible. This is not a thing that can be easily replaced. You cannot substitute another person for someone who has functioned as a catalyst for your own best becoming. The role is too specific, the effect too particular. The version of themselves that you have helped make visible is attached to you in a way that is not transferable to someone else. They know that. It is part of why the saying of this has felt so urgent and so impossible in equal measure. Let me describe the specific experience of carrying this for as long as they have been carrying it. There is a particular kind of tiredness, not physical. The specific cognitive and emotional exhaustion of someone who keeps arriving at the same place in their own thinking and then having to navigate away from it because the place requires something of them. They have not yet found a way to give. A recurring collision with a truth that the surrounding architecture of their life has not yet accommodated. Every time they are in your presence, or in the periphery of your presence, or simply in a moment where the thought of you arrives without being summoned, they bump into this, and every time they bump into it, they feel the specific friction of something unfinished, something that belongs in the space between you that is not yet in the space between you. Something they are carrying that has a destination and that has not yet been delivered to its destination. The carrying is getting heavier, not because what they feel is growing, what they feel has been remarkably consistent, but because the gap between the carrying and the not yet delivering has been accumulating its own weight. The weight of time passing, of opportunities arising and not being taken, of interactions that could have been the moment and were not because the courage was not quite assembled when it was needed. I I want to speak to what they have specifically been unable to find the words for, because it is not just the emotion, it is the form. They do not know how to say this in a way that makes it clear they understand its implications. That is the specific barrier, because what they want to communicate is not a casual disclosure of feeling that leaves the practical consequences vague. What they want to communicate has weight and direction and would change things in a way that requires both people to consciously engage with the change. And communicating something with that kind of practical gravity requires a form that matches the gravity. And every form they have approached this from has felt either too small or too large. Too small, the casual, underdetermined expression of feeling that leaves you with insufficient information about what they are actually saying and what they are actually asking. Too large, the kind of formal declaration that carries so much weight it produces pressure on the receiver rather than simply truth. The thing they are trying to say exists between those two. In a register, they have been unable to locate precisely enough to feel confident using "that is the door they have been standing at." Tell me in the comments if something is clarifying for you right now, if a specific person is present in your awareness in a way that feels like more than coincidence. If what I have been describing has a shape that matches something you have been sensing without having quite named it, I want to know how this is landing. Let me tell you what they would say if the door stopped being a problem. If the architecture of how to say it suddenly became available, if the words assembled themselves in the right form at the right moment without the usual friction between what is felt and what can be expressed, they would tell you that you are someone they did not know was possible until they encountered you. Not in the idealized "you are perfect" sense, in the specific, grounded sense of someone whose qualities, encountered in combination, produced a recognition that was not anticipated, whose particular way of being in the world, of moving through things with the specific quality of attention and care and precision that you bring, hit them in a place they had not previously identified as available to be hit. You registered with a completeness and a specificity that makes the experience of other people feel slightly less textured by comparison, not because others are insufficient, because you introduced a particular frequency into their awareness, and that frequency is now the reference point against which other frequencies are unconsciously measured. They would tell you that they think about you in the specific way that people think about things they have not resolved, with a persistence that is disproportionate to the official status of the connection, with a quality of return that happens without deliberate choice. And that has been one of the more honest things in their recent interior life, precisely because it bypasses their usual management of what they allow themselves to want. They would tell you that they are afraid, not of you, of saying this incorrectly, of the version of this conversation that lands wrong. That sounds like something other than what it actually is. That creates a consequence in the space between you that is harder to navigate than the current arrangement of carrying this alone. They are afraid that saying it imperfectly is worse than not saying it. That is the specific fear. And it is wrong, but it is real, and it has been the primary thing keeping the door closed. I want to speak to something about you that I think matters for how you receive what is coming. You have been giving this person more grace than you have explicitly acknowledged. In the specific moments where something was almost said and then was not, where an interaction ended at a slightly strange point that you noticed and did not press, where the quality of their attention toward you had a weight that could have been addressed directly, and you chose to let it land without comment. That grace was not obliviousness. It was a specific, considered form of generosity. The particular generosity of someone who understands that certain things need to arrive in their own time and who does not extract them before they are ready, even when they can see them building. You have been holding space, perhaps without consciously framing it that way, but that is what the patience has been. Space for something that is taking longer than it needs to find its form. The form is finding itself. You have been holding space, perhaps without consciously framing it that way, but that is what the patience has been. Space for something that is taking longer than it needs to find its form. The form is finding itself. I want to name something about the grace you have been giving that I think you deserve to hear. The specific kind of generosity you have been practicing, the one that does not require acknowledgement and that looks like nothing in particular from the outside, is one of the rarer things I encounter in readings. Because most people, when they sense something building in someone they care about, when they feel the pressure of an unspoken thing pushing against the surface of ordinary interaction, tend to respond in one of two directions. They either reach for it directly, making it visible before it is ready to be visible, or they pull back from it, creating distance as protection against the discomfort of the proximity to something unresolved. You did neither. You simply remained present, steady, with the particular Virgo quality of holding something you have noticed without demanding that the noticing become the subject of the interaction, of letting people arrive at their own moments rather than engineering the moment for them. That is not passive, that is sophisticated, and it has created the conditions in which what is about to arrive has been allowed to develop into something actual rather than being either prematurely extracted or preemptively foreclosed. The form is finding itself, and it found itself in a container that you made available by simply remaining who you are. I want to speak to what happens when it finally arrives, because it will, and the form it takes matters for how you are positioned to receive it. It is not going to be a grand gesture or a dramatic moment that announces itself with fanfare. What I am reading has a quieter quality than that. The specific, intimate quality of something that has been so carefully and so privately held that when it finally comes forward, it comes without performance, without staging, with the slightly unfinished quality of something that has crossed the threshold, not because it finally had the perfect form, but because continuing to hold it became more impossible than whatever imperfect form the saying takes. It will be slightly imperfect. It will not sound quite the way they imagined it would sound when they imagined it. There will be moments where they reach for a word that is not quite right and settle for the closest available one, where the sentence structure does not capture the full size of what is being communicated, where something that has been living in them at high resolution arrives in low resolution because the resolution of language is simply not adequate to the resolution of what they feel. And here is what I want you to know about that imperfection. It is the authenticity, the gap between what they feel and what they can express is not a failure of feeling. It is the specific mark of something real, because things that are real are bigger than language. Things that are performed fit language exactly because they were constructed to fit it. What arrives imperfectly is what is genuine. Receive the imperfection. It is the most honest thing they can offer. As we close, I want to give you one thing to carry. You do not need to do anything with this reading except be present. Not present in the sense of positioning yourself to receive a particular thing or preparing a particular response or being ready with the right expression at the right moment, present in the simpler, more fundamental sense of simply being where you are in your actual daily life, with your actual daily availability. Not more open than you normally are, and not more closed. Just there. Because what is coming is not going to require you to have done anything special in advance. It is not going to reward a particular posture you have been maintaining or punish you for not having been prepared for it correctly. It is simply going to arrive. And when it does, the thing it most needs from you is not a response that has been rehearsed or a reaction that has been calibrated. It needs what you always offer to things that matter: your full, unedited, unhurried attention, the specific quality of being seen that you give to things when you decide they are worth seeing fully. Give this that, whatever it is, in whatever imperfect form it arrives. Give it the full quality of your actual, genuine, completely present Virgo attention. That is the only thing it has ever been trying to earn.